It was a quiet October morning, and the house was permeated with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Sunlight filtered softly through the white linen curtains, casting dancing shadows on the dark wood furniture. I sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the garden that was beginning to be covered in autumn leaves. As I listened to the ticking of the wall clock, a sense of melancholy enveloped me. A familiar feeling. That morning seemed heavier than usual. Before I continue, I ask you to give a like to the video and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and you help me to continue bringing you more stories. That morning was like so many others, but inside me something had changed. My husband, Miguel, was in town for work, as he often was. At 65, he still worked with admirable dedication, and I had always respected him for that. However, loneliness had become a persistent companion over the years. I felt the need for something to break the monotony, a thrill that would make me feel alive again. The sound of the doorbell brought me out of my thoughts. It was my lifelong friend, Isabel, stopping by to say hello. It wasn't unusual for her to come over when she knew Miguel wasn't home. We had always been confidants. Her energy was contagious, and as she told me about her new projects and her excursions into the countryside, I felt that familiar twinge of envy and longing for adventure. After an hour of laughter and shared memories, Isabel said goodbye with a warm hug. I closed the door behind her, and the house returned to silence. I sat back down at the kitchen table, now bathed in the brighter sunlight. I decided to clean the house a bit to clear my mind, starting with the dust accumulated on the bookshelf in the living room. Each book had its own story, a fragment of the past that transported me to happier, more carefree times. As I wiped the cloth across the spines of the books, an old photo album caught my eye. It was there, hidden among novels read and reread. I opened it, and the yellowed pages revealed images of Miguel and me in our youth. Our honeymoon, the first trips to the beach, the carefree smiles that seemed so far away. Those memories wrapped me like a warm blanket, but they also squeezed my heart with a strange melancholy. Among those photos, I saw people I hadn't seen in years, friends and family that life had taken away. And suddenly, my gaze stopped on a photo of Antonio, a friend of Miguel's, and, at the time, also mine. He had always been a charismatic man, with a smile that lit up any place. I remembered the long conversations we had on those evenings shared with friends, the laughter and stories exchanged. I felt a slight shiver as I thought of how nice it had been to have that spontaneous connection with him. The thought of Antonio stayed with me for the rest of the day, like a subtle but constant shadow. I wondered how he had changed over time, if his smile was still the same as I remembered. That night, as the twilight had the sky in violet tones, I sat by the window with a cup of hot tea in my hands. I watched the lights of the houses turning on one by one, imagining the lives going on inside. And I felt an unexpected desire to contact him, if only to say hello after so many years. After a moment's hesitation, I got up and went to get my phone. I sat back down by the window, with the warm glow of the lamp illuminating my face and the raindrops gently hitting the glass. I looked up his name in my contacts, with my heart answering it a little faster than normal. There he was, a man almost forgotten on the list, like a secret kept for years. With a deep sigh, I wrote, "Hello, Antonio. I hope you are well. It's been a long time. How's life?" Time stood still as I waited for a reply, each second stretching with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Finally, the phone vibrated in my hand, and Antonio's name appeared on the screen. "Hello, Maria. What a surprise to hear from you." "I'm fine, thank you. And you? How's life?" A smile came across my face without meaning to. It was a warm, friendly response with no trace of discomfort. With my heart still beating fast, I responded with trembling fingers. I'm fine, thank you. Life is quiet, but I'm glad to hear from you after such a long time. I found some old photos today and so many memories came to mind. I sent the message and curled up on the couch, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Shortly thereafter came her reply. How nice. I have fond memories of those times too. I'd love it if we could catch up sometime. What do you think? I felt a surge of emotions, surprise, joy, and a spark of something deeper. I hadn't expected our virtual conversation to go a step further, but the idea of seeing each other was tantalizing, almost irresistible. That message triggered an exchange that continued in the days that followed. The brief messages filled the empty hours of my days, bringing a spark of excitement and life to the monotony. Antonio would talk about his travels, about new experiences he'd had, while I shared details of my routine, trying to hide the feeling of emptiness I sometimes felt. Each conversation awakened in me a feeling I thought I had forgotten, a connection that went beyond simple memory. I didn't know what it all meant, but I was ready to find out. A few nights later, while Miguel was sleeping soundly on the couch, I began to think about the possibility of meeting Antonio. The sound of the television and his quiet breathing filled the silence of the house. My phone screen lit up, and I saw a new message. Would you like to meet for coffee? Just to catch up. It would be nice to see you after all these years. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a mixture of emotions, excitement, fear, and a slight hint of guilt. I looked at Miguel, his expression peaceful and confident, and then back at the screen. My finger hesitated for a second before I responded. Yes, I like that very much. When is good for you? I sent the message and sat there in the gloom, listening to the sound of the rain increasing outside, while wondering if I was crossing a boundary from which I couldn't return. The day of the meeting came quicker than I expected. I woke up early with a nervousness that accompanied me as I carefully chose what to wear. I opted for a simple but elegant dress, one I hadn't worn in a long time. In front of the mirror, I noticed the wrinkles on my face and the gray strands in my hair. I wondered what Antonio would think, if he would see me differently, or if he would still recognize in me the woman I had been. When I left the house, Miguel dismissed me absent-mindedly from the living room, immersed in his reading. I'll be back for lunch, I said in a firm voice, trying to hide my uneasiness under a smile. The cafe where we had arranged to meet was in the center, lively and with large windows letting in the morning light. I sat at a table near the window and waited with my heart pounding and my mind full of thoughts. Soon after, I saw Antonio enter the cafe. He had changed, of course, but his smile was still the same, and in his eyes shone a spark of vitality that I recognized instantly. He approached with a determined step, and when we came face to face, I felt a shiver run through me. "Maria," he said warmly as he embraced me. That gesture, so simple and familiar, made me forget for a moment all my fears and doubts. We sat down, and time seemed to stand still as we began to talk. We talked about the past, the memories we shared, and the things we had experienced since then. Antonio enthusiastically recounted his adventures, and I, as I listened, felt a mixture of nostalgia and something deeper that I found difficult to describe. As the conversation progressed, the cafeteria began to empty and the sun began to set, bathing the room in a warm orange hue. Antonio leaned a little closer to me, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me hold my breath. "You know, Maria, talking to you has reminded me how important it is to share these moments. There are things I never said, but I always wanted to," she said, softly and emotionally charged. I felt my heart race. His fingers brushed mine on the table, and a current of warmth ran through my body. Without much thought, I leaned towards him, and our gazes met just inches apart. The kiss was gentle, loaded with all the unspoken words and emotions repressed for years. For a moment, the outside world disappeared, and it was just us. With the rain tapping on the windows and sealing that tent of reunion. When the kiss ended, we stood for a moment in silence, looking at each other with a mixture of surprise and understanding. Antonio smiled, gently squeezing my hands. "I don't know what this means, but it was important to me," he said in a whisper. I nodded, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't experienced in a long time. "For me too," I replied in a barely audible voice. We stood up and said goodbye with a long, heartfelt hug. As the rain continued to fall gently, I left the cafe with a clear head and a lighter heart, not knowing what the future would bring, but feeling alive again. When I arrived home, Miguel greeted me with his usual carefree smile. As the night enveloped the house and the sound of the rain faded, I felt grateful for the complexity of life, made up of memories, choices, and moments that define us. That night, as I prepared for bed, I looked over at Miguel, who, as usual, was reading a book under the dim light of his night lamp. His presence, so familiar and constant, brought a lump to my throat. I felt a mixture of tenderness and guilt, a duality that anchored itself in my chest. It wasn't just the memory of the encounter with Antonio that unsettled me, but the feeling of having crossed a line I never thought I would cross. I turned off the light and slipped under the sheets, with my head full of thoughts and emotions swirling incessantly. Miguel looked at me and smiled softly, as if he could see my busy mind. "Everything okay, love?" he asked, his voice warm and kind. "Everything okay, love?" I nodded and smiled back, unable to keep my eyes from watering a little. "Yes, everything's fine," I lied, trying to believe my own words. That night, sleep was slow in coming. The raindrops rattled against the window, setting a steady rhythm that kept me on edge. As I listened to Miguel's quiet breathing next to me, I wondered which way I would go now, knowing that the echo of that kiss and the spark it had awakened in me would still be there, latent, waiting for answers that only time could give me. The story is over now, but if you want to hear other stories of secrets and lies, click on one of the videos you see on the screen. And remember to subscribe to the channel to receive new stories every day.